You have to make time. What's more important? To me, having a connection with others is the most important thing. We're not living in isolated silos. We're living in a world where we connect with one another. Whether we sell products or services, we still need to build relationships. So relationships start from listening. I think a deep connection with people is joy, because you can actually lose yourself. If any of you ever had the experience where you have a lunch or a dinner or a glass of wine with a friend and you lose track of time, that is joy, because you're having a deep connection. Hi, I'm Lynn Sanders. We're in Oak Brook, Illinois. And I found myself in this chair through synchronicity that I was led to Lynn to be here today. What qualifies me for a leader of joy is I've been working in the art of crafting people's stories for over 30 years, helping both Fortune 500 companies, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations be able to create, tell, and share their stories to make a positive impact in the world. And I have a degree actually in music education, which is also touching into the heart of language, from the heart. And I combine that with my background and experience in writing initially. So I worked at a commercial music company, writing live trade shows and commercials, as well as lyrics, and then took that ability to understand the people's inner messages and bring them out into words. So I also have worked with companies just with words and also with music and words. Well, I could sing "Making the most of the moment, that's the way you are. We've been living life right with you, sharing good times, we've come far. We're the heart of Chicago, a spirit filled with pride, growing up together with a good feeling that comes from inside. When you turn to us, welcome home. We're Chicago's very own Channel 9. That was my commercial lyrics. But really, I love to capture stories because I feel it leaves a legacy for people. It lets our spirit live on. So whether it's music with words, or more recently I've mainly been focusing on the words, and I do music on the side, I feel that we all need to recognize that we all make a difference, and we do that through our stories. I have many moments of joy in my life, and I have to say the first thing that came up was the birth of one of my sons. Both of them were experiences of great joy. My first son actually came into the world through an emergency C-section, so I wasn't able to experience the whole thing because I was put out, but I woke up and saw this beautiful child. And my second son came into the world through a regular process, and I have to just say it was a wonderful feeling to think that a human being could just come into the world through loving two people, two people coming together. And both of my sons have been great sources of joy for me. I'm standing on the driveway of my home looking at a book in my arms that took me 20 years to get into the world. It's called Dancing with Tex, T-E-X, The Remarkable Friendship to Save the Whooping Cranes. And I feel like I have my own child. It's my book that I self-published, that I helped raise the money for. And it's a beautiful, beautiful book that tells the story of a remarkable friendship between a man and a rare bird who thinks she's a person, and how their dancing relationship helped save the whooping cranes from extinction. Love. I'm seeing a beautiful white vase. White feels like purity to me. And inside the vase there's a big, big flurry of pink hearts. And they're all just coming out of this vase, just pouring out. Because love is everywhere, and we all just have to recognize that. But it's in a beautiful container because love is beautiful. So when I'm coming out onto an airport ramp, looking at CEOs, I want them to know what's inside this beautiful container of love. I want them to know that even though each of these hearts are separate, they merge into one feeling of love, that we are all connected, and that love that resonates in each of our hearts connects us with each other. Love to me is a oneness feeling, that there's no separation. When I open up the container that I have filled with hearts of love, I want each of these CEOs to know that while they carry their love within them, they touch the lives of many people around the world. They need to recognize that we all have love within us. Love is the connection that binds us together and makes us stronger. The most important thing I believe that people need to recognize when you really love someone else or want to show love is to listen to each other. I think most of us have our own agendas on our mind. So as a CEO, if you really want to be able to have a connection, a deep connection, which I'm grateful to have with many people, you have to listen to their needs and recognize them as a person. And then when you respond to them, come from a loving space, come from a space of understanding where they're at. Well, then I guess you have no time to grow as a human being if you can't listen to each other. Unfortunately, I feel that's the way it is happening right now in our world, where people aren't listening. And if you don't listen, then you're really not caring about one another. So if we could just pause. A CEO can make time. Anyone can make time for what's important. You all know that. You know, if you have an emergency at home, if there's a fire, you stop what you're doing and you take care of the priority. So to me, the priority is listen to one another. And then from there, you can go on to grow in understanding about how to help each other. You have to make time. What's more important? To me, having a connection with others is the most important thing. We're not living in isolated silos. We're living in a world where we connect with one another. Whether we sell products or services, we still need to build relationships. So relationships start from listening. I think a deep connection with people is joy, because you can actually lose yourself. If any of you ever had the experience where you have a lunch or a dinner or a glass of wine with a friend and you lose track of time, that is joy, because you're having a deep connection. I believe that you need to put joy first, because you have to come from a place of starting from the end result and going back to the beginning. So how do you want to build a relationship? Do you want to have a joyful connection with someone or not? So if you start from the place of joy, then you go back and you think, what will build joy? And to me, what builds joy is having that connection, and that starts with listening to one another. Well, I know this may sound funny, but I really love the goodness within people. I love the spirit of giving within people. So I believe strongly in the law of attraction, as many of you have heard of, that whatever you radiate, you attract back. I'm grateful to have wonderful relationships with people. They're not all my clients, but I consider people who I have relationships with friends. So when there's a heart connection, that means I want to give to them just as they might want to give to me or others. I want to do good in the world while I'm here, and that means helping others. So when I hear someone who needs help, as in this case of Lynn looking for people who would represent great presence, a great presence of joy, I think of people I know, and I want to help you, and I want to help shine a light on them. I feel that our world has too many negative stories that are swirling around, and we're all led by a passion of either something we really want to do or something we don't want to happen. So what I don't want to happen is have us be bombarded by negative vibrations all the time. And as a writer, I'm very aware that every word, every thought, every action carries a vibration. So I want to bring out more positive into the world, and therefore I want to shine a light on the people whose stories are bringing light. We need that. So the words you use make a huge impact on your products and services. Let me give you an example. A colleague of mine had a branding message that focused on the word gap. And I said, well, gap is an important word, but it's actually a negative word. It's pointing out the weakness. So let's think for a moment of how do we make that into a positive statement. So I came up with a message of bridging the gap to prosperity. We acknowledge there is a gap, but let's focus on the bridge, which is the positive. So when people are thinking of a branding message, think about messages that get remembered. Black Lives Matter is the big message now. We're not taking it from a negative viewpoint of you don't matter, but we're saying they matter. We're focusing on a positive message. There are many out there, but when you put out a positive message in words, that positive message has a vibration, and it's going to get imprinted on our brain and felt in our heart. And obviously you want to have a positive message carrying on among your audience so that people will remember you in a good way. I do watch the news. Not a lot, but a little bit. I'm a very sensitive person. I want to know what's going on into the world, but I don't want to be brought so low that I'm walking around depressed. And I would say most of the news is negative. So I give myself a certain amount of time to look at the news, watch it, and then I turn it off. I have actually 2 chairs of joy in my home. One is actually my piano bench. I love sitting and playing music. It touches my heart. It makes me feel joyful. So the piano bench is a center of joy. I also have an Amish rocking chair in our bedroom that I use to sit in and meditate, and it gives me a wonderful feeling of peace. So I love going there for the stillness and the peace. If we sat in our chair of joy 4 times a day, imagine how we would feel filled with joy. It's like taking a deep breath. You're resetting your inner space. To me, tapping into your joy is really tapping into your soul, and your soul is naturally filled with joy. We're often brought down by the external world. So I would recommend taking some time every day to sit in your chair of joy. Well, everyone might wonder, do they have a chair of joy? But a chair of joy represents a place that you can sit in and feel really good and very comfortable. And I also used the word a little while ago, tapping into your chair of joy. I really meant tapping into your inner core. Your inner core is your soul. And your soul, to me, is a connection with a higher being, and that is joy. We're often kind of disconnected or distracted by the world, that we're not in our inner space. We're affected by the outer world. So we can actually physically sit in a space that feels good, and that could be considered our chair of joy, or we can tap into wherever we are and imagine we are in that space, just as we would imagine being on a vacation, and feel that joy again. When we are sitting in a space of stillness, we can really let ourselves go into a higher space. And I've felt this when I meditate, when I'm by myself in the woods just walking. It's a space that's really going beyond your physical being. Many people aren't aware of it, but we all do have a spiritual component, even if we say we're not spiritual. But that's a space that we go into when we're not physically conscious, when we're not thinking about things. We're letting our mind just relax and have stillness and peace. So to me, everyone needs to have that time. It's sort of like a retuning. So to all the CEOs listening, when you need to find a chair of joy, I would say think for a moment of a space that's away from your desk, away from your computer, because that's filled with work and it gives your mind lots of different things to think about. Maybe your chair of joy is a bench outside your building. Maybe it's in another lounge space. You want to have some stillness, because when you have stillness, you really, believe it or not, can receive intuitive guidance from a higher source, and it can fill you with joy, can give you a feeling of peace. So when you're around other things and people, you're not necessarily in that space. We all need to have that stillness at some point in our lives, and hopefully every part of our day we can give ourselves even 5 minutes of joy. As joy is free, and having stillness can be free. We just have to be good to ourselves. I think, to me, the hardest thing as a CEO or as an entrepreneur is recognizing that we matter, and that means we have to feed our souls. Just as in the airplane, the air flight attendant will say, put the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then your children. So as a CEO, how do you put the oxygen mask on yourself? Are you so busy worrying about everyone else and your clients that you don't give yourselves time? Is 5 minutes too much? You know, I used to think that meditating for 30 minutes seemed like a lot of time, which it does. But then I realized you don't have to take 30 minutes. Why not 5? Consider it a coffee break for yourself. If you can give others time for lunch or dinner, why not give yourself 5 minutes? Joy really is the answer to our lives. And I'd like to give you a little story about why I feel so strongly about this. First of all, joy is a universal language, just like music is a universal language. It's a feeling that you feel inside, and when you feel that feeling, you're actually like a vibrational antenna, and you're sending out joy to other people. And whether they realize it or not, they're picking up your joy. Think of the ripple effect. A person throws a stone in the ocean, and it makes a ripple, and the ripple continues on. You yourself are creating a ripple, and you can choose the emotion you want to have in your life. Elie Wiesel, who was a very famous best-selling author who lived through the Holocaust, said, "They can take everything from me, but they can't take away my thoughts. And I choose to live in a positive state." One of my dearest friends in the world who passed away from a fourth stroke, his motto was, "Expand in joy." Half of his body was paralyzed from a third stroke, but he decided, after going through a hospital and rehab experience, that he could choose his emotions, and why not choose to live in joy? He was one of my greatest teachers. So I've learned that no matter what challenges I face, and we all are going to face challenges, we can choose to focus on the solution and choose to find the joy. This is the book that my dear friend Roland Takaoka wrote. It's his memoir that he wrote after a third stroke paralyzed his whole right side. He wrote this with one hand on his left side, and it was never published. But on August 23rd, 2018, he died from a fourth stroke, and I had his memoir in my computer. I had his memoir in my computer, and I decided it had to be published. So I wrote the preface to this book, and I interviewed Roland's wife, Barbara, for the epilogue, and I published this book as a tribute to his spirit. Everyone should be able to read it and recognize that you don't have to have a stroke to recognize that you can expand in joy. We all can. And it actually is a book filled with humor and love and transformation. It's called Roland's Story, Inspired by a Stroke, a memoir of hope, healing, and transformation, written by Roland Takaoka. I want people to realize that your words matter and your stories matter. And you may not realize how important they are. It may take an outside person to say, "Hey, that's a great story. More people should hear it." My friend Roland Takaoka wrote a memoir after his third stroke. He didn't know how to go about publishing a story, and he never really asked me to publish it. But when he suddenly passed away, I knew his story had to be published because it's a message of joy. It's a message of learning to live in a state of joy no matter what happens to you. So I think it's a message that we all can learn from, that no matter what happens to us, we choose our state. And our stories matter because they create the ripple effect that help other people get inspired to do good things in the world. Well, this is my year of transformation through collaboration. So to me, living in greater joy is building more relationships with people and helping them as they help me. Together, we're working to build a better world. I know it sounds corny, but I believe in the goodness within each of us. And the way we tap into that inner joy is by having more collaboration with people who believe in what we're doing and who have the same mission of doing good in the world. Joy is the answer.